Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into Moana, a 2016 animated adventure that might look like a bright musical island journey at first glance, but slowly unfolds into something far more emotional and inspiring. On the surface, it feels like a classic Disney story, filled with songs, humor, and stunning visuals, but as the movie progresses, it becomes clear that this is really a story about identity, courage, and listening to the voice inside you when the whole world tells you to stay where you are. When I first watched Moana, I expected a fun, light-hearted adventure and it absolutely delivers that, but what truly surprised me was how deeply it explores the fear of disappointing family, the weight of responsibility, and the struggle of choosing your own path. Moana's journey isn't just about crossing the ocean or restoring balance to the world. It's about understanding who you are and accepting the call you've been running from. The film blends ancient mythology with very real emotions, making the story feel magical, yet personal at the same time. From the very beginning, Moana pulls you into a world where the ocean feels alive, destiny feels heavy, and courage is born from doubt, setting the stage for an adventure that's as emotionally powerful as it is visually beautiful. The story begins long before Moana herself takes her first step into the world. We are taken back thousands of years, to a time when the ocean was full of life, mystery, and gods. The world was shaped by powerful forces, and among them was Te Fiti, the mother island, a living goddess who brought life to everything around her. At the heart of Te Fiti was a magical green stone, the heart of Te Fiti, which had the power to create life and maintain balance in the world. This heart was the source of harmony across the seas. But balance never lasts forever. The demigod, Maui, powerful and admired by humans, felt unappreciated despite all he had given them. Driven by a desire to be loved, Maui stole the heart of Te Fiti, believing it would earn him humanity's admiration. Instead, his actions triggered chaos. Te Fiti transformed into a fiery monster known as Te Cap, and darkness began spreading across the ocean. Maui lost his magical fishhook and disappeared, while the heart vanished into the sea, leaving the world slowly decaying without it. As the legend fades, the story shifts to a peaceful island called Moana. Surrounded by endless ocean, the island appears calm and beautiful, full of greenery, warm sunlight, and gentle waves. Here, a baby girl is born, Moana, the daughter of Chief Tui. From the moment she is introduced, it becomes clear that Moana is different. Even as a toddler, she feels a deep connection to the ocean. When she wanders toward the shore for the first time, the sea itself seems to respond to her presence, playfully guiding her, protecting her, and choosing her in a way no one else notices. But Moana's magical connection to the ocean is cut short when her father intervenes. Chief Tui pulls her away from the water, firmly warning her to never go beyond the reef. For him, the ocean is dangerous, unpredictable, and something to be feared rather than embraced. As Moana grows older, this warning becomes a strict rule. The reef represents a boundary she is forbidden to cross, both physically and emotionally. Years pass, and Moana grows into a strong, curious teenager. She is being trained to become the future chief of Motunui, learning how to lead her people, resolve conflicts, and take responsibility for the island's well-being. On the surface, Moana does everything right. She helps villagers, supports her parents, and tries her best to fit into the role expected of her. But inside, she feels restless. Every time she stands near the shore, the ocean calls to her, stirring something deep within her soul. Chief Tui wants Moana to focus entirely on the land, believing that everything they need is already on the island. He teaches her that the people of Motunui are meant to stay where they are, safe and stable. The ocean, to him, represents loss and danger. Moana's mother, Sina, is more gentle and understanding, noticing her daughter's inner conflict but unsure how to guide her through it. Moana's grandmother, Tala, plays a very different role. Known by the villagers as strange and unpredictable, Tala is deeply connected to the island's ancient traditions and stories. Unlike Chief Tui, she encourages Moana to listen to her heart. Tala understands that Moana's longing for the ocean is not a weakness, but a calling. She senses that Moana's destiny is tied to something far greater than the boundaries of Motunui. As Moana struggles to accept her future as chief, trouble begins to surface on the island. The coconut trees stop producing fruit, and the fish disappear from the nearby waters. What once provided abundance now offers scarcity. The island is slowly dying, and no one understands why. Moana suggests sailing beyond the reef to find new resources, but her father shuts the idea down immediately. The rule remains unbreakable. Feeling trapped, Moana walks along the shore, torn between duty and desire. She sings of the pull she feels toward the ocean, unable to explain why she longs for something she's been told to fear. This internal struggle defines Mona's character early on. She doesn't want to abandon her people, but she also can't ignore the voice inside her, telling her that the answers lie beyond the horizon. Everything begins to change when Mona's grandmother reveals the truth. She takes Mona to a hidden cave beneath the island, where ancient boats are stored. These boats are proof that Motunui's people were once great voyagers who sailed across the ocean, exploring distant islands and living in harmony with the sea. The fear of the ocean was not always part of their culture, was something adopted after Maui's mistake brought darkness into the world. Through this revelation, Mona learns that her connection to the ocean is not random, it is inherited. She comes from a line of navigators, explorers, and wayfinders. The ocean didn't just choose her to remember her people. This knowledge shakes Mona's understanding of who she is and what she is meant to become. Grandmother Tala makes it clear that the island Esteke is linked to the missing heart of Te Fiti. Darkness is spreading, and Motunui will not survive unless balance is restored. Although Mona is frightened, she begins to realize that the responsibility she has been trained for her whole life might not be about staying, it might be about leaving. This marks the true beginning of Mona's journey. She is no longer just a future chief, learning village duties. She is someone standing at the edge of destiny. The ocean continues to call her, not as a temptation, but as a purpose. And while Mona doesn't yet know how or when she will answer that call, one thing becomes clear: her life is about to change forever. As Mona's small kamako finally crosses the reef and enters the open ocean, the sense of safety she has known all her life disappears behind her. Motunui becomes a distant memory, shrinking on the horizon until it is nothing more than a faint line between sky and sea. The ocean now surrounds her completely, vast and endless, stretching farther than she ever imagined. At first, Mona feels a rush of excitement. This is what she has always dreamed of: freedom, movement, discovery. But that excitement quickly gives way to fear as the reality of the journey sets in. The ocean is not gentle or predictable. Waves rise and fall without warning, winds shift suddenly, and the boat feels fragile beneath her feet. Every sound of creaking wood reminds her how small she is in comparison to the world around her. Mona tries to steady herself by remembering the things she has observed throughout her life. She watches the stars, studies the movement of the water, and attempts to guide the boat with confidence. But her lack of experience becomes painfully obvious. She struggles to control the sail, loses her balance more than once, and barely avoids capsizing when a strong gust hits the boat from the side. Panic creeps in slowly, settling deep in her chest. This is the first time Mona truly understands that courage does not erase fear. Instead, courage exists alongside it, forcing her to keep going even when every instinct tells her to turn back. The ocean seems to test her patience and resolve. Sometimes it feels as if the water itself is watching her, waiting to see whether she will give up. When a sudden storm forms, Mona is completely unprepared. Rain lashes down, thunder roars above her, and the waves grow violent. She fights to stay afloat, clinging to the boat as it is thrown around like a toy. The storm overwhelms her, and despite all her determination, she loses control. The kamakawa is badly damaged, and Mona is knocked unconscious as the sea carries her away. When she finally wakes, she finds herself stranded on an unfamiliar island, exhausted and shaken, with no idea how far she has been swept from her original path. As Mona explores the island, she becomes aware that she is no longer alone. The island is lush and alive, but something feels strange. Before she can fully process where she is, she encounters Maui. His presence is immediate and overwhelming. He is loud, confident, and completely sure of himself. Maui introduces himself with grand gestures and exaggerated pride, singing about his legendary feats and how he shaped the world for humanity. To him, these stories are proof of his greatness, evidence that he deserves admiration and worship. Mona listens, confused and frustrated, because the Maui she sees does not match the heroic figure she imagined growing up. When Mona explains why she has come and shows him the heart of Te Fiti, Maui's attitude changes. Instead of taking responsibility, he dismisses her concerns and refuses to help. He treats the destruction spreading across the world as something distant, something that is not his problem anymore. His refusal feels personal to Mona, not just because the mission is important, but because her people are suffering. When Maui tricks her, traps her inside a cave, and sails away on her boat, the betrayal stings deeply. In that moment, Mona feels foolish for believing that legends automatically mean goodness. Once again, the ocean intervenes, freeing Mona and forcing Maui to confront the fact that escape is not an option. When Mona stands up to him, her voice is firm despite the fear she still carries. She refuses to be intimidated by his size or his reputation. This confrontation marks a turning point for her. She no longer sees herself as a girl seeking permission. She speaks as someone who understands the weight of responsibility. Maui reluctantly allows her to travel with him, though he makes it clear that he does not believe in her abilities. Their journey together is filled with tension. Maui constantly mocks Moana, pointing out her mistakes and questioning her usefulness. He relies on strength and magic, while Moana relies on observation and problem-solving. This difference becomes especially clear when they are attacked by the Komora, a group of dangerous coconut pirates who are determined to steal the heart. The attack is sudden and chaotic, forcing Moana to act quickly. She uses the environment to her advantage, thinking several steps ahead instead of charging forward blindly. Her actions help them escape, and although Maui does not openly admit it, he begins to see that Moana brings something valuable to the journey. After the escape, Moana confronts Maui about his past actions. She tells him that the world is breaking because of what he did, and that running away does not undo the damage. This conversation exposes cracks in Maui's confidence. His magic fishhook, which he treats as an extension of himself, becomes the focus of his insecurity. Without it, he feels powerless and forgotten. He insists that before returning the heart, he must retrieve the hook from Lolotai, the realm of monsters. Moana agrees, understanding that Maui's fear is rooted in something deeper than pride. The descent into Lolotai is dark and dangerous, filled with shadows and uncertainty. Inside, they face Tamatoa, a massive crab obsessed with shiny treasures and status. Moana distracts Tamatoa, using wit and confidence, allowing Maui to recover his hook. The danger feels overwhelming, and failure is always close, but Moana refuses to retreat. Her bravery is no longer impulsive, it is deliberate. She chooses to act even when fear threatens to freeze her in place. After escaping Lolotai, Maui struggles to control his powers. His shapeshifting is unstable, and frustration takes over. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he reveals his past to Moana. He explains how his parents abandoned him as a child and how the gods gave him powers out of pity. Everything he has done since then has been driven by a desire to be loved and remembered. This confession changes Moana's view of him. She realizes that beneath the arrogance is someone deeply wounded. Instead of judging him, she listens. She tells him that his worth is not defined by his hook or by the approval of others. As Maui begins teaching Moana the art of wayfinding, she feels something awaken inside her. She learns to read the stars, understand the rhythm of the waves, and feel the direction of the wind. The ocean no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes a guide. Through this process, Moana connects with her ancestors and understands that voyaging is part of who she is. It is not about escaping her responsibilities, but about embracing them fully. When they finally reach Te Feti's island, confidence replaces hesitation. However, the challenge they face is greater than anything before. Te Ka attacks with overwhelming force, and fear returns when Maui's hook is damaged. Terrified of losing his powers forever, Maui retreats, leaving Moana alone. The abandonment cuts deeply. Moana's belief in herself begins to crumble as she floats alone in the vast ocean, questioning whether she was ever truly meant for this journey. Alone with her doubts, Moana faces her lowest moment. The ocean pulls away, and silence surrounds her. Yet this isolation forces her to look inward. Without legends, without destiny, and without guidance, she must decide who she truly is. This moment of quiet reflection prepares her for the strength she will need to finish what she started, not because she was chosen, but because she chooses to continue. Drifting alone on the open sea, Moana feels smaller than she ever has before. The endless water around her mirrors the confusion inside her mind. Every doubt she tried to silence during the journey now rises to the surface. She questions whether she misunderstood the signs, whether she forced herself into a role she was never meant to fill. The ocean, once her ally, now feels distant, almost indifferent. Without Maui beside her, and without the reassurance of success, the weight of failure presses heavily on her chest. For the first time since leaving Motunui, Moana considers the possibility that turning back might be easier than moving forward. As the boat drifts, Moana remembers her grandmother, Tala. The memories arrive softly, like waves lapping against the shore. Tala's voice echoes in her mind, reminding her that the answers she seeks have always been within her. When Tala's spirit appears before her, glowing gently against the dark ocean, Moana is overcome with emotion. This moment is not about instructions or destiny. It is about understanding. Tala does not tell Moana who she must be. Instead, she asks her who she already is. That simple question forces Moana to confront the truth she has been avoiding. Mona realizes that her journey was never about fulfilling someone else's expectations or proving herself worthy of legends. She remembers standing on the shore of Motunui, feeling pulled toward the sea long before she understood why. The ocean did not choose her out of obligation. It responded to her willingness to listen. Mona understands now that even without Maui, even without the heart, she is still herself. She is Mona of Motunui, a wayfinder, a leader, and someone who chooses to move forward despite fear. With renewed clarity, she lifts her head, steadies her hands, and turns the boat back toward Te Fiti. As Mona sails alone toward danger, her movements become more confident. She reads the stars with calm focus, feels the pulse of the waves beneath her feet, and trusts her instincts fully. The ocean responds once more, parting gently to guide her path. There is no hesitation now, no need for reassurance. This is not bravery fueled by excitement, but by purpose. Mona knows the risk she is taking, and she accepts it completely. When Maui returns, having confronted his own fears, the reunion is quiet but meaningful. There are no grand apologies or dramatic declarations. Maui simply stands beside Mona, ready to help without conditions. He admits that he was wrong to run away, wrong to believe that his value came only from his powers. Mona does not scold him. She understands his fear because she has faced her own. Together, they approach Tekar once again, knowing the confrontation ahead will require more than strength. As Tekar rises from the ocean, towering and furious, the threat feels overwhelming. Lava crashes into the sea, sending steam and ash into the air. Maui tries to distract the creature, drawing its attention away from Mona. Each strike he delivers chips away at his damaged hook, and the fear of losing it completely looms over him. When the hook finally breaks, Maui falls into the water. Powerless, the loss is devastating, not just because of what the hook represented, but because it forces Maui to face who he is without it. Mona swims toward Tekar alone, heart pounding but steps steady. As she approaches, something about the creature feels familiar. The anger, the pain, the constant destruction, it all mirrors the emptiness she sensed when holding the heart. Mona pauses, studying Tekar closely, and then the realization hits her with startling clarity. Tekar is not a monster, born of evil. It is Te Fiti without its heart, consumed by loss and unable to recognize itself. Instead of attacking, Mona changes her approach. She sings softly, her voice carrying across the water. The song is not a challenge, but a recognition. She speaks directly to Tekar, acknowledging the pain it has endured and the damage that was done. This moment defines Mona's growth. She does not fight out of anger or fear. She leads with empathy, understanding that healing begins with recognition. As Mona walks forward, the lava recedes, revealing the path beneath her feet. Tekar hesitates, confusion breaking through its rage. When Mona reaches the place where the heart belongs, she lifts it carefully, hands trembling not with fear, but with respect. She restores the heart to Te Fiti, and the transformation is immediate. The lava hardens into stone, the fire fades, and life surges back into the land. Flowers bloom, trees rise, and the island becomes whole once more. Te Fiti awakens, peaceful and radiant, no longer driven by loss. The balance of the world begins to restore itself, and the ocean calms. This victory does not feel loud or triumphant. It feels right. Mona stands quietly, taking in the beauty of what she helped heal, understanding that true leadership is not about dominance, but about compassion. Te Fiti turns toward Maui, restoring his hook, not as a reward for power, but as recognition of growth. Maui's response is different this time. There is gratitude, but no desperation. He no longer needs the hook to define who he is. When Te Fiti offers Mona a gift, she refuses politely. Her reward is not an object or title. It is the knowledge that she chose her path and saw it through. As Mona sails back to Motunui, the journey feels different from when it began. The ocean feels familiar now, like a trusted companion rather than an unknown challenge. When she arrives home, the changes are immediate. The land begins to heal, fish return to the waters, and hope spreads through the village. Mona does not announce her accomplishments. She simply shares what she has learned. She teaches her people how to sail beyond the reef, reconnecting them with their ancestors and their true identity. Chief Tui watches his daughter with quiet pride, recognizing the leader she has become. He acknowledges his own fears and understands that protecting their people does not mean limiting them. Together, they guide Motunui into a new chapter, one rooted in tradition, exploration, and trust. The final image of Mona standing at the front of a voyaging canoe captures the heart of the story. She is no longer torn between land and sea. She belongs to both. Her journey was never about proving herself to the world, but about understanding herself fully. Through courage, empathy, and choice, Moana becomes exactly who she was meant to be, not because of destiny, but because she listened to her heart. After Moana's return to Motunui, life on the island slowly begins to change in ways both subtle and powerful. The once silent shorelines are filled again with movement, as villagers gather to prepare canoes, repair sails, and listen closely to Moana's stories of the ocean beyond the reef. She doesn't speak like a hero boasting about victory. Instead, her words carry calm confidence and understanding, as if she is simply reminding her people of something they had forgotten long ago. The sea, once feared, is now welcomed back as part of their identity. Moana watches quietly as curiosity replaces hesitation, knowing that true leadership is not about commanding others, but inspiring them to move forward on their own. Chief Tui, standing beside her, feels the weight of generations lift from his shoulders. He remembers the stories his own father buried out of fear and loss, stories that once guided their people across the ocean. Seeing Moana step naturally into the role of a wayfinder forces him to confront his past decisions. For the first time, he openly admits that his need to protect Motunui caused him to limit its future. This moment of honesty deepens their bond as father and daughter, not through authority, but through mutual respect. Moana doesn't argue or seek validation. Her journey has already given her clarity, and she understands that growth often comes from acknowledging mistakes rather than hiding them. As the villagers prepare for their first voyage beyond the reef in generations, Moana takes on the role of teacher. She shows them how to read the stars, feel the rhythm of the waves, and trust the signals of the wind. These lessons are not rushed. They unfold patiently, reinforcing the idea that exploration is not reckless adventure, but careful understanding. Elder villagers, once skeptical, watch in awe as ancient knowledge returns to life. Children listen closely, eyes wide with excitement, seeing a future filled with possibility rather than boundaries. The ocean itself feels alive with approval, responding gently to the movement of the canoes. Fish return in abundance, coral regains its color, and the land slowly heals from the damage caused by Teifeti's imbalance. This restoration is not instant or magical in a flashy sense. It is gradual, reinforcing the message that healing takes time, patience, and continued care. Moana understands this deeply. Her journey may be complete, but responsibility does not end with victory. Meanwhile, Maui, watching from afar, struggles with his place in this restored world. Without constant praise, or the need to prove himself, he feels uncertain about his identity. For so long, he believed his value came from admiration and fear. Now, standing quietly on the shore, he realizes that being needed and being valued are not the same thing. When Moana invites him to join the voyages, she does not frame it as a favor or obligation. She offers companionship. This simple gesture allows Maui to see himself differently, not as a legend demanding applause, but as someone who belongs. As the fleet of canoes finally sets sail, the moment carries emotional weight beyond the physical journey. This is not just exploration, it is a reconnection with ancestry, culture, and purpose. Moana stands at the front, steady and composed, her eyes focused on the horizon. She is no longer pulled by uncertainty or fear. Each wave feels familiar, each breeze like a quiet reminder that she chose this path willingly. The island behind her remains safe, not because it is isolated, but because it is now connected to the wider world again. The story's emotional strength lies in how Moana's transformation affects everyone around her. Her courage allows others to face their fears, and her compassion reshapes how leadership is understood. Strength is no longer measured by control or protection alone, but by trust, balance, and openness. Motunui evolves from a place of limitation into a community defined by exploration and unity. As night falls and stars light up the sky, Moana looks upward, recognizing familiar patterns she once followed alone. Now, those same stars guide many. The ocean stretches endlessly ahead, no longer a boundary but an invitation. Moana smiles softly, knowing that her journey was never meant to end with her. It was meant to begin something greater. As Motunui's fleet moves farther from the familiar shoreline, a quiet transformation begins to take shape within Moana herself. The ocean stretches endlessly ahead, no longer mysterious or threatening, but alive with purpose. Each canoe glides smoothly over the water, guided by ancient knowledge reborn through practice rather than memory alone. Moana watches her people learning to trust the sea again, and in doing so, she understands that leadership is not about standing above others, but moving alongside them. The weight she once felt as the chosen one now feels lighter, replaced by shared responsibility and collective hope. The nights at sea bring moments of reflection. Under vast star-filled skies, Moana feels closer than ever to her ancestors. The constellations she once followed, alone now guide an entire community, and the quiet rhythm of paddles against water becomes almost ceremonial. Elder navigators speak softly of forgotten routes and distant islands, while younger villagers listen with awe. These conversations bridge generations, reconnecting Motunui's past with its future. Moana realizes that her journey across the ocean did not end when Te Fiti was restored. It continues through every story told, every lesson passed on, and every sail raised with intention. During one calm evening, Moana stands at the edge of her canoe, watching the moonlight dance across the waves. The ocean responds gently, lifting slightly as if acknowledging her presence. There is no dramatic display of magic, only a quiet understanding between them. She remembers how the sea first chose her as a child, pushing her toward a destiny she didn't yet understand. Now, she feels grounded, not because the ocean leads her, but because she has learned to listen. That balance between guidance and choice defines who she has become. Maui, traveling alongside the fleet, observes Moana with a mixture of admiration and humility. He no longer feels the need to dominate the narrative or seek constant recognition. Instead, he watches how Moana earns trust through patience, how her strength lies in empathy rather than force. In quiet moments, he reflects on his own past, the fear of abandonment, the desire to be praised, and the mistakes that followed. Being among the voyagers gives him a sense of belonging he never truly felt before. Not as a demigod worshipped from afar, but as someone valued for presence rather than legend. As days pass, the fleet encounters challenges that test their unity. Sudden storms roll in without warning, forcing everyone to rely on one another. Sails must be adjusted quickly, directions recalculated, and fear managed collectively. Moana does not issue commands in panic. She listens, observes, and guides calmly, reminding others that the ocean is not an enemy to be conquered, but a force to be respected. Her steady approach prevents chaos, turning moments of danger into lessons of resilience. Each challenge strengthens the group, reinforcing trust in their shared journey. Between these trials, moments of joy naturally emerge. Laughter echoes across the water as children spot dolphins swimming alongside the canoes. Music returns, with villagers singing songs inspired by the rhythm of the sea. These simple moments highlight what was missing when Motunui turned inward out of fear. Exploration is not only about reaching new lands, it is about rediscovering joy, curiosity, and connection. Moana sees how the ocean, once blamed for loss, now becomes a source of healing. Eventually, the fleet reaches a distant island, untouched by human presence. Its shores are lush, its waters clear, and life thrives freely. As the canoes approach, no one rushes forward. There is a respectful pause, a shared understanding that discovery carries responsibility. Moana steps onto the sand first, not as a conqueror, but as a visitor. She kneels, touching the ground gently, acknowledging the balance of nature she fought so hard to restore. This moment symbolizes a new philosophy: exploration guided by care rather than control. As the villagers begin setting up camp, Moana reflects on how far she has come from the girl who once stood at the edge of the reef, feeling torn between duty and desire. She no longer questions where she belongs. Her identity is not confined to one island or one role. She is both leader and learner, navigator and protector, daughter and wayfinder. That clarity allows her to move forward without fear of losing herself. Maui approaches her quietly, offering help without theatrics. Their exchange is simple but meaningful, showing how both have evolved. Maui no longer seeks validation through grand gestures, and Moana no longer doubts her voice. Together, they represent growth born from struggle, rather than perfection. Their journey reshaped them in different ways, but the ocean brought them together through shared understanding. As night falls on the new island, a fire is lit, and stories begin once again. Moana listens rather than speaks, allowing others to share their experiences and emotions. Some talk about fear they felt leaving home, others about excitement for what lies ahead. These voices remind her that her journey was never meant to make her stand alone. It was meant to open paths for many. Looking out at the horizon, Moana feels a deep sense of peace. The ocean stretches endlessly, filled with possibilities rather than uncertainty. The stars shine brightly, familiar and reassuring. She understands now that finding herself was never about reaching a destination. It was about learning to trust her heart, honor her ancestors, and restore balance where it was lost. With each new voyage, that balance continues to grow, carried forward by those willing to listen to the call of the sea. As the voyagers settle on the newly discovered island, life slowly begins to take shape in a way that feels both unfamiliar and deeply natural. The land is rich, filled with towering trees, freshwater streams, and fertile soil, untouched by fear or restriction. Moana watches her people explore cautiously, not driven by conquest, but guided by respect. She encourages them to observe before acting, to understand the land before shaping it. This approach reflects everything she learned on her journey. Balance is not found through control, but through harmony. The days that follow are filled with learning and adaptation. Fishermen study the waters, noticing how fish move freely without the signs of depletion that once plagued Motunui. Farmers examine the soil, amazed by how effortlessly plants grow when nature is allowed to thrive. These discoveries spark conversations about how fear once limited their vision. Moana listens carefully, recognizing that leadership now requires patience rather than urgency. She is no longer fighting to save her people from collapse. She is guiding them toward a future defined by wisdom. At night, Moana often walks alone along the shore. The ocean responds softly, waves brushing against the sand, as if acknowledging her presence. In these quiet moments, she reflects on how her identity has changed. She once believed being chief meant staying behind to protect her island. But now she understands that protection can also mean movement, finding new paths, new homes, and new understanding. The sea no longer feels like a boundary separating her from safety. It feels like a bridge connecting generations, cultures, and possibilities. Maui spends much of his time helping the villagers, without drawing attention to himself. He lifts heavy stones, clears paths, and shares knowledge gained from centuries of wandering. Some villagers recognize him as the demigod from legends, but his behavior confuses their expectations. He no longer seeks praise or fear. Instead, he laughs easily, listens more than he speaks, and works alongside everyone else. This quiet transformation surprises even him. For the first time, he feels valued, not for his powers, but for his willingness to belong. One afternoon, Moana gathers the elders to discuss the future. The question is no longer whether they should explore, but how they should do it responsibly. Stories of their ancestors returning to mind, not as fearless conquerors, but as thoughtful navigators who respected the ocean's rhythms. Moana proposes that voyaging should continue, but not blindly. Each journey should be guided by purpose, sharing resources, learning from others, and preserving balance wherever they go. The elders agree, recognizing that Moana's leadership has reshaped their understanding of tradition itself. As time passes, Moana begins to feel the weight of another realization. While this island offers opportunity, it is not meant to replace Motunui. Instead, it represents something greater, the revival of a voyaging culture that once connected islands across vast distances. She understands that her people are not meant to abandon their home, but to expand their identity beyond a single shoreline. This clarity fills her with confidence rather than doubt. She no longer feels torn between duty and desire, because both now move in the same direction. One evening, as the sky burns orange and purple with sunset, Moana notices something familiar on the horizon. The ocean swells gently, forming playful waves that circle her canoe. She smiles, recognizing the sea's unique way of communicating. It is not calling her away from her people, but reminding her that the journey is never truly finished. Growth does not end with success. It continues through curiosity, humility, and care. The villagers prepare for another voyage, this time shorter and deliberate. Moana joins them, not as a symbol, but as a participant. She navigates alongside others, teaching them how to read the stars, feel the currents, and listen to the wind. These lessons are not commands. They are shared experiences. Each navigator adds their own observations, strengthening the collective knowledge. Moana realizes that leadership becomes most powerful when it multiplies rather than sectorizes. During the voyage, a sudden shift in weather challenges the crew. Dark clouds gather quickly, and strong winds push against the canoes. Fear rises briefly, especially among those still new to the ocean's unpredictability. Moana remains calm, reminding everyone to trust what they have learned. Instead of fighting the storm, they adjust their course, allowing the wind to guide them safely through. The moment becomes a quiet victory, reinforcing confidence, not just in Moana, but in themselves. After the storm passes, the ocean returns to calm, almost serene. The crew exchanges relieved smiles, realizing they have crossed another invisible threshold. They are no longer people hiding from the sea. They are voyagers again. Moana feels a deep sense of pride, not because she led them through danger, but because she watched them lead themselves. Back on shore, Maui approaches Moana with a rare seriousness. He admits that for most of his life, he believed strength came from being admired. Watching Moana, He understands now that true strength comes from helping others discover their own. This realization does not erase his past, but it softens it. Moana listens without judgment, acknowledging that healing is rarely immediate. Their conversation is quiet, honest, and free of expectation. As days turn into weeks, Motunui becomes a place of movement once more. Canoes arrive and depart, carrying stories, tools, and ideas between islands. Moana's mother and father watch with pride as their daughter balances tradition with progress. They see not just a chief, but a wayfinder whose heart remains open to learning. Moana understands that she does not need to prove herself anymore. Her journey has already reshaped her world. Standing once again at the edge of the ocean, Moana reflects on the fear that once kept her people confined. That fear came from loss, misunderstanding, and disconnection. By restoring Te Fiti, she did more than heal the land. She healed memory itself. The ocean no longer holds anger or mystery. It holds stories waiting to be heard. As the sun rises over the horizon, Moana feels complete, yet open. She knows challenges will return, as they always do. But she also knows she will face them not alone, and not afraid. The call of the ocean is no longer a question demanding an answer. It is a conversation that will continue for generations, carried by those willing to listen. As Motunui's canoes continue traveling between islands, Moana begins to notice a subtle but powerful shift in her people. The fear that once controlled every decision has not disappeared overnight, but it no longer defines them. Instead of asking whether they should explore, the villagers now ask how they can do it better. Every voyage becomes a lesson, not just in navigation, but in understanding the balance between ambition and responsibility. Moana realizes that rebuilding a culture is not about dramatic moments. It is about steady, thoughtful change. One morning, Moana joins a group of young navigators preparing for their first independent journey. She does not stand above them or give long speeches. Instead, she listens as they discuss routes, currents, and potential risks. Their confidence surprises her. These are children who once grew up believing the ocean was dangerous and forbidden, yet now they speak of it with curiosity and respect. Moana gently corrects small misunderstandings, reminding them that the sea is not something to conquer, but something to work with. Her guidance feels less like leadership and more like mentorship. As the canoes depart, Moana watches them disappear into the horizon. There is pride in her chest, but also responsibility. Leadership, she has learned, does not end when others succeed. It deepens. Every decision she makes now shapes not just her island, but the future identity of her people. This realization weighs on her, yet it does not overwhelm her. She has learned to trust herself, even when certainty is impossible. Later that day, Moana meets with her father near the shoreline. Chief Tui has changed more than he admits aloud. The man who once feared the ocean now studies it with quiet respect. He speaks of his past decisions honestly, acknowledging how fear shaped the rules he enforced. Moana listens without blame. She understands that fear often disguises itself as protection. Their conversation is calm, filled with mutual understanding rather than conflict. For the first time, Moana sees her father not just as a chief, but as someone who also struggled to lead. That evening, the village gathers to share stories brought back from recent voyages. Travelers speak of islands recovering from decay, of people rediscovering lost traditions, and of oceans slowly healing now that balance has been restored. These stories spread hope, but they also raise new questions. Some villagers wonder whether they should intervene more actively in helping other islands. Moana listens carefully, recognizing the danger of believing one success grants authority over others. She reminds them that true help begins with respect, not control. Maui, observing from the edge of the gathering, feels something unfamiliar stirring inside him. For centuries, he measured his worth by how loudly his name echoed through legends. Now, sitting quietly among ordinary people, he feels a different kind of fulfillment. He watches Moana lead not through power, but through understanding, and it forces him to confront his own identity. Without constant praise, who is he? The answer unsettles him at first, but it also brings relief. For once, he does not need to perform. Later that night, Maui approaches Moana with a question, rather than advice. He asks whether she ever feels afraid that she might fail her people. Moana answers honestly, admitting that fear never truly disappears. What changes is how one responds to it. She explains that fear once tried to stop her from leaving the island, but now it reminds her to think carefully before acting. Maui listens, realizing that strength does not come from ignoring fear, but from understanding it. The next day brings unexpected news. A canoe arrives carrying villagers from a nearby island, suffering from dwindling resources. Their land has begun to weaken again, and they seek guidance rather than rescue. Moana welcomes them warmly, but she is careful not to promise solutions she cannot guarantee. She asks questions, studies their situation, and invites them to share their knowledge. Together, they explore possible paths forward, blending experiences rather than imposing answers. This collaborative approach sets a powerful example for both communities. As plans develop, Moana notices something deeply important. Her role is no longer to be the one with all the answers. Instead, she creates space for answers to emerge. This realization brings her peace. She remembers how lonely leadership once felt when she believed she had to prove herself constantly. Now, leadership feels shared, supported by trust and open dialogue. During a quiet moment by the sea, Moana senses the ocean's presence once again. It does not demand action or signal danger. It simply moves beside her, steady and calm. She understands that the ocean reflects her own journey, once wild and uncertain, now balanced and purposeful. The connection remains, not as a burden, but as a reminder that she is part of something far greater than herself. As weeks pass, Motunui becomes a center of learning, rather than authority. Navigators return with maps, stories, and lessons gained through experience, rather than conquest. Children grow up watching canoes come and go, absorbing the idea that exploration is natural, not forbidden. Moana often joins these children, teaching them quietly through example. She wants them to grow with curiosity instead of fear, confidence instead of defiance. One afternoon, a sudden realization strikes Moana. The greatest gift of her journey was never restoring the heart or saving the island. It was restoring choice. Her people can now choose when to stay, when to go, and how to live without being ruled by past mistakes. This understanding fills her with gratitude rather than pride. Maui prepares to leave once more, feeling the pull of distant horizons. Before departing, he thanks Moana, not for changing his destiny, but for reminding him that he still has one. Their farewell is quiet, without grand gestures. Moana watches him disappear into the sky, knowing that paths sometimes separate so they can grow in different directions. As night falls, Moana stands at the shore, listening to the waves. She no longer asks who she is meant to be. She knows. She is a wayfinder, a leader, and a bridge between past and future. Her journey did not end when she returned home. It evolved, and as the stars reflect on the ocean's surface, Moana understands that every generation will answer the ocean's call in its own way, guided not by fear, but by trust. As seasons begin to shift around Motunui, the island enters a quiet phase of transformation. The excitement of rediscovered voyaging slowly settles into something deeper and more sustainable. Canoes no longer depart with urgency or fear, but with careful preparation and thoughtful intention. Moana notices how the rhythm of island life has changed. The ocean is no longer spoken about in whispers or warnings. It is discussed openly, studied, respected, and understood as a living force rather than a threat. This shift feels subtle, but Moana knows it represents a profound change in how her people see the world and their place within it. Moana spends more time observing than directing. She walks through the village at dawn, listening to conversations carried by the sea breeze. Fishermen talk about new routes they plan to test. Elders exchange stories that were once forgotten, now spoken proudly again. Children practice reading the stars, using simple markers drawn in the sand. These moments reassure Moana that leadership does not require constant presence at the center. Sometimes, it is strongest when it steps slightly aside and allows growth to happen naturally. Yet with growth comes challenge. Not every voyage returns smoothly, and not every decision leads to immediate success. One canoe returns damaged after misjudging, shifting currents near a distant reef. No lives are lost, but the experience shakes the confidence of the young crew. Moana meets them quietly by the shore, listening as they explain what went wrong. She does not correct them immediately. Instead, she lets them reflect, guiding the conversation so they uncover the lessons themselves. When she finally speaks, it is with calm clarity, reminding them that mistakes are not failures unless they are ignored. The crew leaves stronger than they arrived, carrying knowledge earned rather than given. That evening, Moana sits alone near the water, reflecting on how different her journey feels now compared to when she first left the island. Back then, every step forward felt like defiance. Now, progress feels collaborative. She realizes that her true challenge is no longer proving herself, but maintaining balance between confidence and humility. The temptation to act quickly, to solve everything herself, still exists. But she has learned patience, understanding that lasting change grows slowly, like tides shaping stone. One night, Moana dreams of her grandmother Tala. In the dream, Tala does not speak. She simply dances along the shore, her movements flowing like waves. Moana wakes with a sense of calm rather than longing. She understands that guidance does not always arrive as instruction. Sometimes, it arrives as reassurance that one is already walking the right path. This realization strengthens Moana's trust in her instincts. Soon after, messengers arrive from a distant island with troubling news. Their crops are failing again, and fishing grounds are becoming unstable. They fear that the balance restored after Te Fita's healing is shifting unevenly. Moana listens carefully, resisting the urge to assume the cause. She remembers that not all struggles have a single source. The ocean is vast, and its changes are complex. Instead of offering immediate solutions, she invites representatives from multiple islands to gather and share knowledge. The gathering becomes unlike any council Motunui has seen before. There is no central authority, no one voice dominating the discussion. Navigators, farmers, fishermen, and elders sit together, exchanging observations rather than demands. Moana facilitates quietly, ensuring everyone is heard. Patterns begin to emerge as stories overlap. Some islands report stronger currents, others shifting winds. The conclusion is not simple, but it is honest. Balance has been restored globally, but locally, adaptation is still required. Moana suggests shared voyages rather than isolated efforts. By combining knowledge and resources, islands can learn from one another instead of struggling alone. This idea is met with hesitation at first. Cooperation requires trust, and trust takes time. Moana does not pressure them. She simply reminds them that isolation once nearly destroyed Motu. The ocean connects all islands, whether they acknowledge it or not. As preparations begin for joint voyages, Moana feels the weight of responsibility returning, but it no longer feels overwhelming. She has learned to share it. She notices that others step forward willingly, offering leadership in their own ways. This reassures her that the future does not depend on her alone. It depends on collective understanding. During one of these voyages, Moana joins as a participant rather than a guide. She wants to experience the challenges alongside others, not above them. The sea is calm at first, then unexpectedly turbulent. The crew adjusts together, reading signs from the water and sky. In that moment, Moana realizes how much she has grown. Fear no longer dominates her reactions. Respect does. She feels deeply connected to the ocean, not as something she must appease, but as something she understands. The journey strengthens bonds between islands, but it also reveals differences in tradition and belief. Some navigators rely heavily on ancestral stories, others on observation and adaptation. Rather than choosing one approach, Moana encourages blending them. Progress, she understands, does not erase the past. It builds upon it. This philosophy begins shaping a new shared culture among voyagers, one rooted in respect rather than dominance. Back on Motunui, Moana's mother Sina observes these changes quietly. She sees her daughter moving with calm assurance, no longer burdened by doubt. One evening, Sina speaks to Moana honestly, expressing pride not just in her achievements, but in the person she has become. She tells Moana that leadership is often lonely, but it does not have to be isolating. Their conversation is gentle, filled with understanding rather than advice. Moana feels supported in a way she had not fully realized she needed. As months pass, Motunui becomes known not as a powerful island, but as a wise one. Travelers come seeking exchange, not instruction. Moana welcomes them all with openness, always reminding herself that wisdom grows stale when it believes it is complete. She continues learning, continues listening, continues evolving. One quiet afternoon, Moana stands by the shore watching the horizon. The ocean stretches endlessly, no longer calling her away, but walking beside her. She understands that her journey was never about choosing between land and sea. It was about understanding how both shape identity. She belongs to the island, to the ocean, and to the space between them. As the sun sets, Moana feels a sense of continuity rather than conclusion. Her story is not ending. It is expanding, carried forward by every canoe that leaves the shore with curiosity instead of fear. The ocean remains vast and unpredictable, but so is potential. And Moana, once a girl searching for her place, now stands confidently within it, knowing that leadership is not about reaching a destination, but about guiding others as they discover their own paths. The renewed connection between the islands slowly reshapes life across the ocean, but with progress comes a deeper responsibility. Moana begins to realize that leadership is not only about guiding people forward, but also about preparing them for moments when things do not go as planned. As more canoes travel farther than ever before, the ocean tests them in new ways. Weather patterns shift unexpectedly, currents pull stronger near unfamiliar waters, and navigation requires sharper awareness. Moana does not see these challenges as warnings to stop, but as reminders that growth demands attentiveness. One morning, a fleet prepares to leave Motunui for a longer voyage meant to map new safe passages. Moana watches the preparations closely, noticing how confidently the crews move. There is pride in their posture, but also calm discipline. She addresses them briefly, not with grand speeches, but with quiet encouragement. She reminds them to trust both their skills and one another. As the canoes disappear beyond the horizon, Moana feels a familiar tension in her chest, not fear, but concern. Letting go has become one of her greatest lessons. Days pass, and the village continues its routines, yet a subtle unease settles in. The ocean remains calm near the shore, but distant winds shift in unfamiliar patterns. Moana senses that something is off, though she cannot yet name it. She consults with experienced navigators, sharing observations rather than commands. Together, they study the stars at night and the behavior of birds by day. Signs suggest a developing storm far beyond the reef, one that could interfere with the fleet's route. Moana faces a difficult decision. Sending another group after the fleet could either help or complicate matters. She chooses patience over impulse, trusting the skills she helped cultivate. This choice weighs heavily on her, testing her ability to stand still when action feels easier. Leadership, she learns again, is not about constant movement, it is about choosing the right moment. Eventually, signals arrive from the fleet through agreed markers left on drifting floats. They report strong winds, but manageable conditions. Relief spreads through Motunui, but Moana remains cautious. She knows the ocean's moods can change without warning. She orders preparations for support voyages not to intervene immediately, but to be ready if needed. This balance between readiness and restraint becomes the defining feature of her leadership. As the fleet continues its journey, Moana reflects on her early days, when she believed courage meant facing danger. Now she understands that courage also means trusting others to face danger themselves. This realization deepens her respect for the people she leads. They are no longer followers, learning the basics. They are navigators in their own right. During this period, Moana receives visitors from islands that had once isolated themselves completely. Their leaders speak openly about fear, about how generations of caution turned into stagnation. They see Motunui not as a solution, but as proof that change is possible without losing identity. Moana listens carefully, sharing her experiences without framing them as lessons. She emphasizes that the ocean does not belong to any one island, and neither does wisdom. Together, they discuss the emotional cost of change. Moana speaks honestly about doubt, about moments when she questioned her own decisions. This vulnerability surprises some of the visitors, but it also builds trust. They realize leadership does not require certainty, requires honesty. These conversations mark the beginning of deeper alliances rooted in shared understanding rather than necessity. One evening, Moana walks alone along the shore, watching waves reflect moonlight. She feels the presence of the ocean not as a force guiding her steps, but as a constant companion. She realizes she no longer needs signs or calls. The ocean speaks through patterns she has learned to read. This quiet confidence marks a turning point. Moana is no longer defined by her journey to restore balance. She is defined by how she sustains it. Suddenly, news arrives that one canoe from the fleet has gone off course. Panic threatens to spread, but Moana remains composed. She gathers navigators and calmly organizes a response. Instead of reacting emotionally, she applies everything she has learned. Routes are recalculated, weather signs reevaluated, and communication plans activated. The response is swift but measured, reflecting collective discipline rather than individual heroism. Moana joins the recovery voyage, not as its leader, but as a navigator among navigators. The sea is rougher than expected, waves rising sharply under darkening skies, yet the crew works seamlessly, adjusting sails and correcting course together. In the distance, they spot the missing canoe, damaged but afloat. Relief washes over the group, but Moana does not allow celebration to overshadow caution. They stabilize the vessel and guide it towards safer waters, working through the night. During the return journey, Moana speaks with the crew of the damaged canoe. She listens as they recount their mistakes and fears. Instead of correcting them, she asks questions that help them understand what went wrong. By the time they reach Motunui, the crew has already drawn its own conclusions. This reinforces Moana's belief that true leadership empowers reflection rather than dependence. Back on the island, the recovery strengthens trust across the community. The incident becomes a shared lesson, rather than a source of blame. Moana encourages open discussion, ensuring that fear does not take root. She understands that silence can be more dangerous than storms. By addressing the experience openly, the community grows more resilient. As weeks pass, voyaging becomes not just an activity, but a cultural renewal. Songs change, incorporating references to stars and currents once forgotten. Children play games that mimic navigation, learning without realizing it. Moana observes this with quiet pride. Culture, she realizes, evolves most powerfully when it is lived, rather than taught. Maui briefly returns during this time, appearing unexpectedly near the shore. His presence brings humor and chaos, but also reflection. He observes Moana's leadership with curiosity, noting how she no longer needs dramatic gestures to inspire action. Their conversation is light-hearted, yet meaningful. Maui admits that restoring balance was easier than maintaining it. Moana smiles, understanding exactly what he means. Before leaving again, Maui reminds Moana that legends are not built by single acts, but by sustained choices. His words stay with her long after he disappears beyond the horizon. Moana reflects on how stories will be told about this time, not as tales of monsters defeated, but as narratives of cooperation and growth. As another voyage sets sail under a clear sky, Moana stands among her people, not apart from them. She feels deeply connected to every canoe that leaves the shore, every navigator reading the stars, every island rediscovering its place in the world. The ocean stretches endlessly ahead, full of uncertainty and promise. Moana understands now that balance is not a final achievement. It is a continuous process, shaped by listening, learning, and adapting. And as long as her people move forward with respect for the sea and one another, she knows they will find their way together. As Motunui continues to thrive through renewed voyaging, Moana slowly begins to feel the weight of continuity rather than crisis. The urgency that once pushed her forward has softened into something more complex, a steady responsibility to protect what has been rebuilt. Life on the island is fuller now, louder with activity, yet Moana notices that growth brings new tensions. Some villagers struggle to adapt to constant movement, while others hunger for more exploration than caution allows. The balance she restored in the world now has to be maintained within people's hearts. Moana spends her mornings walking through the village, observing rather than directing. Fishermen discuss routes instead of arguing over nets, and elders debate star patterns instead of retelling old fears. These conversations tell her that the island is changing not because of rules, but because of shared purpose. Still, she senses an undercurrent of restlessness among the younger navigators, many of whom have only known expansion and freedom. They have not experienced loss the way she has, and that gap shapes how they see the ocean. During one gathering, a young navigator speaks openly about pushing farther than agreed routes, convinced that courage alone will keep them safe. His words stir quiet agreement among others. Moana listens carefully before responding. She does not dismiss their desire, nor does she praise recklessness. Instead, she speaks about listening to the ocean rather than conquering it. She explains that confidence without understanding can quickly turn into danger. Her words are calm, but firm enough to leave a lasting impression. That night, Moana dreams of the sea shifting beneath her feet, waves forming paths, and then erasing them. When she wakes, she carries a sense of warning rather than fear. The ocean is not calling her to adventure this time, it's asking her to pay attention. She spends the next day consulting navigators and elders alike, piecing together subtle signs of environmental change. Winds are behaving differently, currents drifting slightly off familiar patterns. None of it signals disaster, but together they suggest transition. Moana realizes that her role is evolving again. She is no longer the one meant to journey alone. Instead, she must prepare others to face uncertainty without her presence. This realization is heavier than any monster she faced before. Letting go of control tests her more deeply than taking it ever did. She begins organizing shared learning gatherings where navigators of different experience levels exchange observations, building collective awareness rather than hierarchy. As these exchanges grow, Moana notices something powerful happening. Older navigators regain purpose through teaching, while younger ones learn humility through listening. Knowledge stops being something earned through heroism and becomes something grown through cooperation. The island feels stronger, not because it moves faster, but because it moves together. One afternoon, a canoe returns earlier than expected, damaged by sudden waves near unfamiliar waters. The crew explains that they ignored early signs, assuming skill alone would carry them through. No one was hurt, but the lesson is clear. Moana addresses the village without accusation. She speaks about how mistakes are part of learning, but repeating them out of pride can cost lives. Her honesty resonates deeply, and the crew accepts responsibility without shame. This incident becomes a turning point. Rather than discouraging voyaging, it deepens respect for preparation. Routes are reviewed, signals refined, and emergency protocols strengthened. Moana ensures that these adjustments are not framed as restrictions, but as tools of survival. She understands that fear shuts people down, while respect keeps them alert. Meanwhile, connections with other islands grow more complex. Some communities embrace voyaging fully, while others adopt it cautiously. Moana travels occasionally to these islands, not as a leader imposing ideas, but as a listener sharing experiences. Each island adapts in its own way, reminding Moana that balance cannot look the same everywhere. This diversity strengthens the network rather than weakening it. On one visit, Moana meets a leader who refuses ocean travel entirely, scarred by past loss. Instead of persuading him with logic, Moana listens to his story. She shares her own fears quietly, not as proof, but as understanding. Though the leader does not change immediately, Moana knows the seed of possibility has been planted. She learns that patience can be more powerful than certainty. Back on Motunui, Moana senses a personal shift. She no longer measures success by visible change, but by resilience during uncertainty. She spends time with children learning navigation games, watching how naturally they absorb patterns. Their ease comforts her. The future feels less fragile when curiosity replaces fear. One evening, as the sun sets in deep gold hues, Moana stands at the water's edge, reflecting on how much her relationship with the ocean has changed. It no longer pulls her forward, it stands beside her. She understands now that leadership is not about standing ahead of others, but walking among them. The ocean taught her to listen before moving, and that lesson continues to guide her. Unexpectedly, storms form farther out than predicted, affecting several voyaging paths at once. Moana does not panic. She activates communication signals across islands, coordinating responses without taking command alone. Navigators adjust routes collectively, sharing updates through agreed systems. The network holds no one is lost. When the storm passes, it leaves behind trust rather than damage. The success of this response confirms something important for Moana. The world no longer depends on her singular courage. It depends on shared awareness. This realization brings relief and quiet pride. She has not only restored balance, she has helped others learn how to protect it. Later, Moana meets with elders who speak about how legends will be told at this time. She gently corrects them, suggesting that stories should focus on people rather than heroes. She wants future generations to see themselves reflected in the past, not overshadowed by it. The elders agree, understanding that stories shape identity. As days pass, Motunui feels both grounded and open, rooted yet curious. Moana watches canoes depart without fear tightening her chest. She trusts the systems built through cooperation and respect. Though uncertainty remains part of the ocean, it no longer feels threatening. It feels natural. Moana understands now that the true challenge was never restoring balance. It was learning to live within it. And as long as her people continue to listen, adapt, and care for one another, she knows the ocean will continue to guide them, not as a force to be feared, but as a partner in their journey forward. With the ocean routes now stable and communication between islands stronger than ever, Moana finds herself entering a quieter phase of leadership, one where decisions are less dramatic, but far more demanding. The village no longer looks to her for rescue, but for guidance during moments of uncertainty. This shift forces Moana to confront a truth she had not fully faced before. When there is no crisis, people still need direction, clarity, and reassurance. Peace carries its own responsibilities. Moana begins spending more time with the navigators, who have recently returned from long journeys. Their stories are not filled with monsters or miracles, but with subtle challenges, unexpected tides, unfamiliar constellations, moments of doubt when confidence wavered. She listens closely, realizing that courage does not disappear when danger fades. It simply takes quieter forms. These conversations help her understand how leadership must adapt to everyday realities, rather than heroic moments. At the same time, Moana notices tension growing between tradition and innovation. Some navigators rely strictly on ancestral techniques, while others experiment with new interpretations of stars and currents. Neither side is wrong, but the division threatens unity. Moana knows that choosing one over the other would weaken the foundation she worked so hard to rebuild. Instead, she creates spaces where both perspectives can coexist, encouraging shared journeys where experience and curiosity balance each other. One such journey becomes unexpectedly significant. Moana joins a small crew, heading toward a familiar island route, not as a commander, but as a participant. She allows others to lead decisions, resisting the instinct to intervene. During the voyage, minor disagreements arise, nothing dangerous, but enough to test cooperation. Moana watches carefully, stepping in only to ask questions rather than give answers. Slowly, the crew begins resolving issues on their own, learning from one another rather than competing for authority. This experience leaves a deep impression on Moana. She realizes that her presence alone can sometimes silence growth if she is not careful. True leadership, she learns, means knowing when to step forward and when to step back. The ocean mirrors this lesson, offering guidance without force, shaping paths without controlling them. Back on Motunui, Moana's parents observe the changes in her leadership style. Chief Tui notices that the village operates more independently now, while Sina sees a calm confidence in her daughter that wasn't there before. Their quiet pride reminds Moana that growth does not always require acknowledgement. Sometimes, success is measured by how little control is needed. As seasons pass, Moana senses another shift, this time within herself. She no longer feels defined by the journey that saved her island. While that adventure shaped her, it no longer defines her purpose. She begins asking deeper questions about legacy, not in terms of how she will be remembered, but how her people will continue long after she is gone. These thoughts surface during a nighttime gathering by the shore, where elders share stories under the stars. When Moana speaks, she does not retell her own journey. Instead, she speaks about collective effort, about how every canoe that leaves the shore carries responsibility beyond itself. Her words resonate deeply, especially with the younger listeners, who begin to understand that heroism can exist within teamwork and care. Unexpectedly, a message arrives from a distant island reporting confusion among their navigators. Their currents have shifted subtly, and old markers no longer align. Rather than rushing to intervene personally, Moana organizes a collaborative response. Navigators from multiple islands share observations, compare patterns, and gradually map the changes together. This process takes time, patience, and humility, but it works. Moana watches from a distance as solutions emerge without her direct command. This moment confirms something she has been hoping for. The network is learning to function without depending on her alone. The realization brings both relief and a quiet sadness. Letting go is not easy, even when it is necessary. During a rare moment of solitude, Moana returns to the water's edge, reflecting on how the ocean once pulled her away from everything familiar. Now, it feels like a constant companion, rather than a call to escape. She understands that her bond with the ocean was never about adventure, it was about listening. And that skill remains relevant no matter where she stands. The next challenge arrives not from nature, but from doubt. A group of villagers question whether constant voyaging is sustainable, fearing exhaustion and loss of identity. Moana addresses these concerns openly, acknowledging that growth must never come at the cost of belonging. She emphasizes that voyaging is not about leaving home behind, but about strengthening it through connection and understanding. Her honesty creates space for dialogue rather than conflict. Some voyages are postponed, others reshaped. The village learns that flexibility is not weakness, is awareness. Moana sees how far her people have come, not just in skill, but in emotional maturity. As preparations begin for a large interland gathering, Moana feels a sense of quiet fulfillment. This event is not about celebration alone, but about shared learning. Canoes arrive carrying stories instead of warnings, experiences instead of fear. The ocean between islands no longer separates, it connects. During the gathering, Moana listens more than she speaks. She notices how leaders from other islands have adopted similar approaches, focusing on cooperation rather than command. This shared evolution reassures her that balance is not something she imposed, it's something people discovered together. Toward the end of the gathering, a young child approaches Moana, asking whether she misses her first journey. Moana smiles softly before answering. She explains that, while she remembers it with gratitude, she does not long for it. What matters more is watching others find their own paths, just as uncertain and meaningful. As the canoes depart and the shoreline quiets again, Moana feels a deep sense of peace. She knows challenges will return, as they always do, but she also knows that her people are ready. The systems they have built are rooted not in fear, but in trust. Moana walks back through the village as the sun rises, watching daily life continue with steady confidence. She understands now that leadership is not a single journey, but a lifelong process of listening, adapting, and letting go. And as long as the ocean continues to teach these lessons, she will continue to learn alongside her people, not ahead of them. After the interland gathering concludes, Motunui slowly returns to its familiar rhythm, but the atmosphere feels different now. There is a quiet confidence in the way people move, speak, and make decisions. Moana notices that her presence no longer causes conversations to pause or directions to wait for her approval. Instead, People act with intention, trusting their own judgment. This change reassures her that leadership has truly taken root within the community, not just in one person. Mona spends her days walking through the village, observing rather than directing. She sees fishermen adjusting routes based on shared knowledge from other islands, children learning navigation basics as naturally as they once learned fishing, and elders exchanging stories that now include new discoveries alongside ancient wisdom. The blend of past and present feels balanced, as if Motunui has finally found harmony between who they were and who they are becoming. Yet within this calm, Mona senses an inner restlessness, returning not the pull that once dragged her into the ocean, but a quieter question asking what comes next. She realizes that stability does not mean stillness. Growth, even when peaceful, continues to demand awareness. The ocean remains calm, but its currents still shift beneath the surface, reminding her that change never truly stops. One afternoon, Mona receives reports from several navigators who have noticed subtle disruptions far from known routes. The changes are not dangerous, but they are unusual enough to raise concern. Rather than reacting with urgency, Mona gathers representatives from multiple islands to discuss the patterns together. What emerges is not a threat, but a realization that the ocean itself is evolving, responding to long periods of imbalance that are only now settling. This discovery reframes Mona's understanding of her journey. Restoring the heart of Te Fiti was not the end of healing it, was the beginning of a longer process. Nature, like people, recovers gradually. The ocean does not demand action, it invites patience. Mona shares this perspective openly, encouraging others to observe rather than interfere, to listen before acting. During this period, Mona reconnects deeply with her own roots. She spends time with the elders, learning stories that were once considered too ordinary to matter. These tales speak of seasons without adventure, years defined by care rather than conflict. Mona realizes how easily such stories are overlooked, even though they hold the wisdom needed to sustain peace. Her relationship with her parents also shifts. Chief Tui speaks less as a former leader and more as a father, offering insight without expectation. Sina reminds Mona that identity does not need constant proof. Their quiet support grounds her, reminding her that leadership should never erase the person beneath the role. As weeks pass, Mona begins mentoring a small group of young navigators, not by teaching routes or techniques, but by guiding their mindset. She encourages them to ask questions, to respect uncertainty, and to accept that mistakes are part of discovery. Watching them struggle, adapt, and grow fills her with a sense of fulfillment, deeper than any triumph she experienced on the open sea. One evening, while sitting alone by the shore, Mona feels the ocean respond with urgency, but with reassurance. It does not call her away. Instead, it mirrors her stillness, reflecting the stars with perfect clarity. She understands then that her bond with the ocean was never meant to isolate her from her people. It exists to remind her that connection, not escape, is the true purpose of voyage. A moment of doubt arises when a neighboring island hesitates to continue shared exploration. Fearing overextension, Mona approaches the situation carefully, choosing dialogue over persuasion. She listens to their concerns fully before speaking, acknowledging the weight of responsibility that comes with leadership. Her honesty opens space for trust rather than resistance, and the island agrees to move forward at its own pace. This moment reinforces an important lesson for Mona. Leadership does not require unity through sameness. Respecting different rhythms strengthens the whole. The network of islands grows not because they move together, but because they remain connected even when they pause. As preparations begin for another season of voyaging, Mona feels a calm readiness rather than excitement. She no longer measures success by distance traveled or challenges overcome. Instead, she values sustainability, understanding that the greatest journeys are those that allow people to return home stronger than before. In quiet reflection, Mona acknowledges that her role will continue to change. One day, she may no longer be at the center of these decisions. That is not a loss. It is the natural outcome of shared strength. The thought brings peace rather than fear. The ocean remains constant, stretching endlessly beyond the horizon. But Mona no longer feels the need to chase it. She walks back into the village as lanterns light the pathways, knowing that her purpose now lies in nurturing what has already begun. And as the waves roll gently against the shore, Mona understands that her story was never about a single heroic journey. It was about learning when to sail forward, when to wait, and when to trust others to carry the horizon ahead. As the season shifts and the winds grow steadier, Motunui enters a phase of quiet expansion rather than dramatic change. Canoes leave the shore more frequently now, not driven by urgency, but by curiosity and cooperation. Mona watches these departures with a sense of calm pride, knowing that the spirit of voyaging has finally become a shared responsibility instead of a burden, carried by one leader alone. Each canoe that disappears beyond the horizon carries not just explorers, but trust. Mona's role continues to evolve in subtle ways. She finds herself stepping back during discussions, allowing others to voice ideas before she speaks. When disagreements arise, she does not rush to resolve them. Instead, she lets conversation breathe, trusting the people to navigate their way toward understanding. This patience reflects a deeper confidence, one built not on authority, but on belief in collective wisdom. During one gathering, a navigator from a distant island shares stories of unfamiliar waters where the ocean behaves differently. Currents moving in unexpected patterns that challenge even experienced sailors. The room grows quiet as listeners absorb the implications. Rather than reacting with concern, Mona asks thoughtful questions, encouraging shared analysis rather than fear. The discussion transforms uncertainty into curiosity, and by the end of the evening, plans are forming not to conquer these waters, but to learn from them. Later that night, Mona walks alone along the shoreline, reflecting on how much her understanding of leadership has shifted. Once, she believed she had to carry every answer within herself. Now, she sees leadership as the ability to create space where answers can emerge naturally. The ocean remains beside her, vast and silent, no longer a force pulling her away, but a presence that listens as much as it guides. In the days that follow, Mona begins documenting shared knowledge routes, weather patterns, island histories not as commands or instructions, but as living records meant to grow over time. She encourages others to add their experiences freely, allowing the collective memory to evolve. These records are not stored away. They are shared openly, reinforcing the idea that knowledge belongs to everyone, not just those in power. Her interactions with younger villagers grow more intentional. Mona spends time listening to their fears and ambitions, remembering how isolated she once felt, carrying expectations far beyond her years. She reassures them that uncertainty does not mean failure, and that growth rarely follows a straight path. Watching their confidence slowly build reminds her of her own early doubts, making her grateful for the journey that shaped her. One afternoon, a familiar presence returns when Maui appears at the edge of the village, unmistakable in his relaxed posture and playful grin. His arrival causes excitement, but Mona greets him with calm warmth rather than surprise. Maui notices the changes immediately, not just in the island, but in Mona herself. Their conversation is lighter now, grounded in mutual respect rather than necessity. Maui shares that he has been traveling freely, helping where he can, learning when not to interfere. He admits that stepping back has been harder than stepping in, a lesson he did not expect. Mona listens, recognizing a shared understanding between them. Neither of them needs to prove their worth anymore. Their identities are no longer defined by constant action, but by awareness. As Maui prepares to leave again, he offers a final thought that lingers with Mona long after he has gone. That balance is not something achieved once and protected forever. It must be revisited, questioned, and respected continuously. Mona carries this insight with her, recognizing its truth in both leadership and life. A challenge soon arises when news arrives of a neighboring island struggling with dwindling resources despite stable waters. Rather than intervening directly, Mona suggests a collaborative effort: shared navigation support, knowledge exchange, and long-term planning rather than immediate rescue. This approach requires patience and trust, but it allows the island to regain stability without losing independence. The process is slow, and there are moments when progress feels invisible. Mona resists the urge to accelerate outcomes, reminding herself that sustainable solutions often grow quietly. When the island eventually stabilizes, the success feels deeper because it belongs to everyone involved, not just those who initiated help. As months pass, Motunui becomes a place where movement and stillness coexist naturally. Some days are filled with voyaging and discovery. Others are spent maintaining what already exists. Mona learns to value both equally, understanding that constant motion is not the same as meaningful growth. She is not chosen because she is separate from her people, but because she stands among them, listening and learning alongside everyone else. One evening, during a simple gathering by the shore, Mona watches children play near the water, fearless and curious. She sees no burden in their eyes, no pressure to fulfill expectations beyond their years. This sight fills her with a quiet sense of success, knowing that the future is no longer weighed down by unresolved pasts. As the stars reflect across the water, Mona feels no pull to leave, no unfinished call demanding action. Instead, she feels grounded, aware that her journey continues, not through dramatic voyages, but through everyday choices that shape lasting harmony. The ocean remains endless, but Mona understands now that purpose is not measured by how far one travels. It is measured by how deeply one belongs. As Motunui settles into a rhythm shaped by shared effort and quiet confidence, Mona begins to notice changes that go beyond voyaging or leadership structures. The island feels different in a way that cannot be measured through maps or routes. Conversations are longer now, more thoughtful, and often filled with questions rather than conclusions. People no longer look to Mona for instant answers. Instead, they come to her to think things through together, which feels like the truest sign of growth she could have hoped for. One morning, as the sun rises gently over the water, Mona joins a group repairing an older canoe. She works alongside them without instruction, listening more than speaking. Her hands steady as she ties worn fibers and replaces damaged wood. The simplicity of the moment reminds her that leadership does not always stand at the front. Sometimes it kneels in the sand, sharing effort without drawing attention. The others seem to understand this instinctively, treating her presence as natural rather than symbolic. As days pass, Mona becomes increasingly aware of how the ocean itself has shifted in her perception. It no longer feels like a voice calling her away from home, nor a force demanding action. Instead, it feels like a quiet companion, present even when unspoken. She senses its movements not as commands but as patterns, something to understand rather than obey. This change brings a deep sense of peace she had not known before. A council gathering later that week introduces a difficult discussion. Some villagers express concern that voyaging could eventually pull people away from Motunui permanently, weakening the island's core. Others argue that exploration is essential for survival and growth. The room fills with tension, voices rising slightly, old fears brushing against new ambitions. Mona does not intervene immediately. She allows the discussion to unfold, trusting the process she helped create. When she finally speaks, her words are careful and grounded. She does not defend voyaging blindly, nor does she dismiss the concerns being raised. Instead, she reframes the conversation, suggesting that movement and belonging do not have to exist in opposition. She reminds them that voyaging once defined their ancestors, yet community remained at the heart of everything they built. The room grows quieter, not because disagreement disappears, but because understanding begins to form. After the gathering, Mona walks through the village, reflecting on how fear often disguises itself as protection. She remembers her own fear of leaving, how it once felt like loyalty to her people. Now she understands that fear can limit just as much as it can preserve. True care requires trust, even when outcomes cannot be guaranteed. Later, Mona spends time with her mother, Sina, whose presence remains steady and observant. Sina notices the weight Mona still carries, even if it no longer shows through urgency or doubt. Their conversation is gentle, filled with pauses rather than advice. Sina reminds her that responsibility does not end when balance is restored. It simply changes shape. Mona absorbs this quietly, recognizing the truth in her mother's words. As the season continues, Mona encourages cultural exchange between islands, not through grand gestures but through shared stories, music, and craftsmanship. Visitors bring unfamiliar songs and patterns, while Motunui offers its own traditions in return. These exchanges create bonds that feel personal rather than political, strengthening connections without imposing identity. Mona watches these moments unfold with quiet satisfaction, knowing that respect grows best when it is mutual. One evening, during a small celebration by the shore, Mona notices a young girl standing apart from the others, watching the waves with focused intensity. She recognizes the look instantly, the same pull she once felt, the same unspoken question. Instead of approaching directly, Mona waits. Eventually, the girl comes to her, asking simple questions about navigation, about the stars, about whether the ocean ever feels overwhelming. Mona answers honestly. She does not romanticize the journey or hide its challenges. She speaks of fear, of doubt, of moments when she wished she could turn back. But she also speaks of clarity, of the peace that comes from trusting oneself. The girl listens closely, not seeking permission, but understanding. Mona realizes then that inspiration does not come from perfection, but from honesty. In the weeks that follow, Mona reflects on how stories shape identity. She understands now that legends are not meant to place heroes above others, but to remind people of what is possible within themselves. This realization softens the weight of her own story. She no longer feels defined by her achievements, but by how she allows those achievements to influence the world around her. The ocean grows restless one night, waves shifting in unfamiliar patterns. It is not a threat, but a reminder that balance is never static. Mona observes the change calmly, gathering others to study the movement rather than react impulsively. Together, they analyze currents and adjust plans accordingly. There is no panic, only cooperation. The island responds not with fear, but with awareness. As dawn breaks, Mona stands at the edge of the water, feeling neither pulled forward nor held back. She understands that purpose is not a destination reached and left behind. It is something that must be lived repeatedly, shaped by choices both large and small. The ocean reflects the sky above her, endless yet calm, mirroring the balance she now carries within herself. In that quiet moment, Mona realizes that her journey did not end when the world was restored. It continues every day, in conversations, decisions, and trust. She does not need another call to adventure to feel fulfilled. She is exactly where she needs to be, moving forward without leaving herself behind. The island breathes with her, steady and alive, no longer waiting for a single voice to guide it. And Mona, once defined by the question of who she was meant to be, now lives comfortably within the answer she discovered on her own terms. As life on Motunui continues to evolve, Mona becomes increasingly aware that peace does not mean stillness. Balance, she learns, requires attention just as much as action. The ocean remains calm most days, yet its presence is never passive. It shifts with the wind, responds to the moon, and carries stories from faraway places. Mona often finds herself watching the horizon, not because she feels called to leave, but because understanding has replaced restlessness. The sea is no longer an escape. It is a relationship that must be respected and observed. The village begins preparing for a long-anticipated gathering with neighboring islands, an event that feels different from celebrations of the past. This time, the focus is not on trade or ceremony alone, but on shared learning. Elders discuss navigation methods, fishermen compare seasonal changes, and children exchange songs and games that reflect different island cultures. Mona moves quietly through these preparations, offering guidance when asked, but allowing others to take ownership of the event. She recognizes that leadership flourishes when space is given for others to contribute fully. During these preparations, Mona reconnects deeply with the traditions passed down through generations. She spends evenings listening to elders recount stories that were once considered warnings rather than lessons. Tales of failed voyages, lost connections, and fear-driven decisions now feel just as important as stories of triumph. Mona understands that honoring the past means acknowledging mistakes as much as victories. These stories ground her, reminding her that wisdom often comes from discomfort rather than success. One afternoon, Mona joins a group of young navigators practicing wayfinding techniques. She watches as they struggle to read subtle changes in the water and sky, their frustration visible as they misinterpret signs. Instead of correcting them immediately, Mona encourages patience. She explains that navigation is not about control, but about listening. The ocean does not shout directions. It whispers patterns. Slowly, the group begins to relax, their movements becoming more deliberate, their observations sharper. As the gathering draws closer, tensions surface unexpectedly. Some villagers worry that increased connection with other islands could bring conflict or dilute their identity. Old fears resurface, echoing concerns once voiced by Mona's own father. These conversations weigh heavily on her, not because she doubts her choices, but because she understands the fear behind them. Change, even when positive, challenges comfort and tradition. Mona chooses to address these worries openly, rather than dismiss them. In a quiet meeting by the shore, Mona speaks honestly about her own journey. She shares how fear once kept her close to home, and how courage did not erase that fear, but allowed her to move alongside it. She emphasizes that connection does not erase identity. It strengthens it through understanding. Her words do not immediately resolve every concern, but they create space for dialogue. The villagers listen, not because she demands it, but because her experience resonates. The night before the gathering, Mona feels a familiar weight settle over her. It is not doubt, but responsibility, the awareness that her actions influence more than just herself. She walks alone along the beach, feeling the sand cool beneath her feet, the rhythm of the waves, steady and reassuring. In that solitude, she reflects on how far she has come. The girl who once questioned her place now understands that purpose is not fixed. It grows with experience. When the visiting canoes arrive, the island fills with energy. Laughter, music, and unfamiliar accents blend seamlessly with Motunui's rhythms. Mona welcomes the guests, not with ceremony alone, but with genuine curiosity. She listens to their stories of survival, adaptation, and loss, recognizing familiar themes woven through different lives. Despite cultural differences, The emotional core feels universal. As days pass, the exchange deepens. Islanders learn new fishing techniques adapted to changing waters, while Motunui shares its renewed voyaging knowledge. Mona observes how collaboration sparks innovation without erasing tradition. She sees children from different islands playing together, creating new songs that blend melodies instinctively. These moments affirm her belief that growth does not require abandoning roots. Yet, not everything unfolds smoothly. A disagreement arises over resource sharing, tensions briefly escalating as misunderstandings surface. Mona steps in not as a mediator imposing solutions, but as a facilitator encouraging perspective. She asks questions rather than offering answers, guiding the discussion toward mutual understanding. Gradually, voices soften, and compromise emerges. The resolution feels earned rather than enforced. Through these challenges, Mona becomes acutely aware of the quiet strength required to lead sustainably. It is not dramatic or celebrated, but steady and deliberate. She learns that true leadership often involves absorbing tension so others can find clarity. This realization deepens her respect for those who came before her, whose choices shaped the world she now navigates. On the final evening of the gathering, a shared ceremony takes place by the water. Torches line the shore, reflections dancing across the waves. Songs rise into the night, carrying gratitude, remembrance, and hope. Mona stands among her people, feeling connected, not through obligation, but through shared intention. She senses the ocean responding gently, its surface calm yet alive. As the visitors prepare to depart, Mona feels neither sadness nor relief, but fulfillment. The connections formed feel lasting, rooted in respect rather than dependency. She understands that maintaining these bonds will require effort, patience, and continued openness. But for the first time, that responsibility feels balanced rather than burdensome. In the days that follow, life returns to its familiar rhythm. Yet something fundamental has shifted. Motunui feels more expansive, not geographically, but emotionally. Mona notices increased confidence among the villagers, a willingness to question, adapt, and engage. She knows this change did not come from her alone, but from collective courage. Standing once again at the edge of the water, Mona reflects on the idea of destiny. She no longer views it as a singular path or calling, but as an evolving relationship between choice and circumstance. The ocean reflects the sky, endless yet grounded, mirroring the balance she strives to maintain. Mona steps forward, not because she is called elsewhere, but because forward motion has become part of who she is. Her journey continues, not toward a distant horizon, but within the living, breathing world she helps shape every day. Mona wakes early the morning after the gathering ends, sensing a quiet shift in the air. The island feels the same, yet beneath the familiar sounds of waves and birds, there is a new awareness moving through Motunui. People rise with purpose, not urgency, but intention. Canoes are checked, nets repaired, and conversations linger longer than before. Mona notices how often villagers now glance toward the ocean, not with fear or longing, but with thoughtful curiosity. The sea has become a partner again, not a boundary. As Chiefess Mona begins focusing on what comes next. Reconnection is not a single event, it is a commitment. She organizes regular voyaging practice, encouraging both experienced sailors and beginners to participate. Elders once hesitant now sit alongside younger navigators, sharing stories while learning new techniques in return. Knowledge flows both ways, dissolving the idea that wisdom belongs only to the past or the future. Mona understands that sustaining this balance is her greatest responsibility. During one training voyage, the ocean behaves unpredictably. Winds shift suddenly, and currents pull against expectations. Rather than panic, Mona instructs the crew to slow their movements and observe. She reminds them that nature does not test strength alone, but adaptability. Together, they adjust their course using stars, waves, and instinct. When they return safely, confidence spreads through the village, not because the voyage was easy, but because it was navigated with awareness rather than force. Despite these successes, Mona senses an undercurrent of doubt within herself. Leadership brings clarity, but also isolation. She often misses the simplicity of acting on instinct alone, without the weight of consequence pressing against every decision. At night, she walks along the shore, letting the ocean brush against her ankles, grounding her thoughts. In those moments, she allows herself to feel uncertainty without judgment. One evening, Mona feels a familiar presence beside her. The air seems warmer, the waves gentler. Though no words are spoken, she senses the spirit of her grandmother, Tala, not as a vision, but as reassurance. The feeling is subtle yet powerful, reminding Mona that guidance does not always arrive as answers. Sometimes, it arrives as trust in one's ability to navigate unknown waters. Soon after, news arrives from a distant island facing environmental imbalance. Crops are failing, and fishing grounds have grown sparse. Messengers arrive seeking guidance, unsure whether to ask for help or simply understanding. Mona listens carefully, recognizing echoes of Motunui's own past struggles. She does not promise solutions immediately. Instead, she invites collaboration, suggesting shared voyages to study changes in tides and seasons together. Preparing for this journey stirs mixed emotions among the villagers. Some fear becoming responsible for others' survival, while others see an opportunity to strengthen regional unity. Mona addresses these concerns openly, emphasizing that assistance does not mean sacrifice of stability. It means shared learning and mutual resilience. Her calm honesty steadies the discussion, allowing cautious optimism to take root. When the canoes depart, Mona sails alongside navigators from both islands. The journey is long, filled with quiet observation rather than dramatic challenges. Days blend into nights as stars guide them forward. Conversations unfold naturally, revealing how different communities interpret similar signs in nature. Mona realizes that knowledge does not compete. It complements. Every perspective sharpens understanding. Upon arrival, the affected island reveals its struggle clearly. Soil lies dry, reefs show signs of stress, and people move with quiet worry, etched into their expressions. Mona resists the urge to take control. Instead, she listens. Elders describe changes they have observed, patterns disrupted without clear cause. Mona encourages joint exploration rather than immediate action, believing sustainable solutions emerge from comprehension. Together, they study currents, rainfall patterns, and fishing behaviors. Over time, connections emerge. Subtle changes in voyaging routes and overharvesting in certain areas have contributed to imbalance. The realization does not bring blame, but responsibility. Mona watches as islanders begin discussing adjustments willingly, understanding that preservation requires conscious restraint as much as effort. As days pass, Mona earns respect not through authority, but through presence. She participates in daily tasks, shares meals, and listens more than she speaks. Her approach reinforces the idea that leadership thrives in humility. The islanders begin implementing small changes, rotating fishing zones, diversifying crops, restoring reef areas. Progress is slow, but hope returns steadily. During a quiet moment near the water, Mona reflects on how interconnected these challenges truly are. No island exists in isolation. The ocean binds them together, carrying consequences across distances unseen. This understanding deepens her commitment to fostering communication among islands, not as alliances of necessity, but as communities of shared stewardship. When it is time to return home, Mona feels a sense of fulfillment, tempered by realism. Solutions are ongoing, not final. She exchanges promises of continued collaboration, knowing that trust must be renewed continually through action. As the canoes pull away, she watches the shoreline recede, confident that connection has replaced uncertainty. Back on Motunui, Mona gathers her people to share what she has learned. She speaks not of success alone, but of responsibility. She emphasizes that caring for their island means considering how their choices ripple outward. The villagers listen attentively, recognizing that growth requires mindfulness beyond immediate needs. Inspired, the community begins implementing practices learned from their neighbors. Fishing becomes more deliberate, farming more adaptive. Mona notices a renewed sense of collective ownership emerging. People speak openly about long-term impact, passing these conversations to children naturally, embedding stewardship into daily life. As seasons change, Motunui thrives not through abundance alone, but through balance. The ocean responds gently, its rhythms steady yet alive. Mona stands at the shore once more, feeling gratitude rather than longing. Her journey has not ended, it has matured. She understands now that purpose is not found at a destination, but sustained through mindful movement. Each choice shapes the path forward, just as each wave shapes the shore. Mona steps back into her role, fully present, ready to navigate whatever currents arise, not alone, but alongside her people and the living world they protect. Mona feels the shift before anyone else notices it. It begins quietly, not as a threat, but as a subtle imbalance in the familiar rhythms of island life. The tides arrive slightly earlier than expected, the wind lingers longer in certain directions, and the stars seem to drift just enough to catch her attention during night voyages. These are not signs of danger, but reminders that nature is never static. Balance is something that must be understood again and again. As chiefess and wayfinder, Moana knows that noticing these changes early is what allows the community to adapt instead of react. She begins spending more time at sea, sometimes alone, sometimes with small groups of navigators who are still learning to trust their instincts. These journeys are not about reaching new lands, but about observation. Moana teaches them to feel the ocean rather than fight it, to read the movement of water against the hull, and to recognize how the wind speaks through sound and pressure. She encourages silence during parts of the voyage, believing that listening is just as important as steering. Slowly, confidence grows among the crew, not because they feel fearless, but because they feel prepared. Back on Motunui, Moana introduces a council system that brings together elders, farmers, fishers, and young navigators. Decisions are no longer carried by one voice alone. Each meeting becomes a space where experience and curiosity meet. Elders share stories of seasons long past, while the younger generation describes patterns they are beginning to notice themselves. Moana guides the conversation without controlling it, understanding that leadership does not mean having all the answers. It means asking the right questions and trusting others to help shape solutions. One discussion focuses on expansion. With voyaging restored, some villagers feel eager to explore further and establish new settlements. Others worry that growing too quickly could stretch resources thin. Moana listens carefully, weighing excitement against caution. She reminds them that exploration once stopped, not because curiosity faded, but because balance was lost. The lesson is clear. Movement must always be guided by awareness. The council agrees to approach expansion slowly, prioritizing sustainability over ambition. During this period, Maui returns unexpectedly, appearing on the shoreline as if summoned by the ocean itself. His presence draws mixed reactions. Some villagers greet him with awe, others with lingering uncertainty. Maui, for his part, seems different. He carries less bravado, more quiet reflection. He jokes less loudly and listens more carefully. Moana notices this change immediately. Their reunion is warm, built on mutual respect rather than excitement alone. Maui explains that he has been traveling between islands, observing how the restoration of Te Fiti has affected the wider world. In many places, nature is healing, but not without challenges. Some communities struggled to adapt after generations of imbalance. Maui admits that he feels responsible, not out of guilt, but out of understanding. Power without wisdom caused harm, and wisdom without humility can do the same. Moana appreciates his honesty, recognizing how far he has come. Together, they walk along the shore, discussing what it means to protect balance now that the immediate threat is gone. Maui asks Moana how she manages the weight of leadership without losing herself. She answers truthfully, admitting that it is not easy. Some days, doubt is constant. But she has learned that uncertainty does not mean weakness. It means awareness. Maui nods, realizing that even demigods are still learning how to belong. Maui offers his help, not as a hero, but as support. He suggests creating a network between islands, using his ability to travel quickly to share knowledge and warnings when changes arise. Moana agrees, but with one condition. The islands must remain responsible for their own choices. Guidance should empower, not control. Maui accepts this, respecting her vision. As weeks pass, the collaboration begins taking shape. Messages travel between islands, sharing information about weather patterns, fishing practices, and crop cycles. Moana oversees this quietly, ensuring communication remains respectful and balanced. She understands that unity does not require sameness. Each island has its own identity, shaped by its environment and history. The goal is not to create one way of living, but to support many ways that respect nature. Despite progress, Moana faces moments of personal reflection. Leadership leaves little room for privacy, and expectations follow her everywhere. One night, she sails alone beyond the reef. Guided only by starlight, the ocean remains calm, as if offering companionship rather than challenge. Moana allows herself to think not as a leader, but as a young woman who once felt trapped by expectations. She realizes that while her role has changed, her core has not. She is still someone who listens, questions, and moves forward even when certainty is incomplete. On her return, she finds the village preparing for a gathering unlike any before. Islanders from distant lands are arriving, bringing stories, songs, and customs shaped by different waters. The atmosphere feels alive with shared curiosity. Moana welcomes them not with speeches, but with presence, joining meals and listening to conversations unfold naturally. She sees how connection builds trust faster than formality ever could. During the gathering, discussions turn toward the future of voyaging. Some speak of mapping new routes, others of preserving old ones. Moana encourages both perspectives, reminding everyone that tradition and innovation are not opposites. They exist together, strengthening one another. The ocean, after all, has always changed, yet remained itself. As the gathering ends, Moana stands once more at the shore, watching canoes depart in different directions. She feels no fear, only calm determination. The world beyond Motunui is vast, but it is no longer unknown. It is connected. She understands now that her journey was never meant to end with restoring a heart or defeating darkness. It was meant to begin a cycle of listening, learning, and guiding. Moana turns back toward her village, confident not because everything is solved, but because the foundation is strong. Balance is no longer something lost and recovered. It is something lived, every day, through mindful choices and shared responsibility. With that understanding, she steps forward, ready for whatever currents the future brings. Moana wakes before dawn on the final morning of the great gathering, the island still wrapped in a quiet calm that feels sacred rather than empty. The sky carries a soft blend of fading stars and early light, and the ocean rests in a way that feels intentional, as if it, too, understands that something meaningful is about to settle into place. For the first time in a long while, there is no urgent problem demanding her attention. What remains is reflection. She walks toward the shoreline, where canoes from distant islands are tied gently, each one carrying stories of different seas, different winds, and different lives. As she runs her hand along the carved wood, she realizes how far her people have come. Voyaging is no longer a forgotten memory or a risky dream. It has become a shared language again, spoken through navigation, respect, and trust. The fear that once held Motunui in place has faded, replaced by confidence rooted not in control, but understanding. As the village begins to stir, elders gather near the meeting stones, children chase each other through paths lined with palm leaves, and visitors prepare for their journeys home. Moana notices her parents standing together near the shore. Her father watches the horizon with quiet pride, no longer seeing it as a boundary meant to protect, but as a doorway that offers connection. Her mother smiles softly, knowing that the daughter who once felt torn between duty and desire has found harmony within herself. Before the canoes depart, Moana calls everyone together, not for a formal speech, but for shared acknowledgement. She speaks calmly, without dramatic gestures, her voice steady like the tide. She talks about how balance is not something achieved once and then forgotten. It is something maintained through listening, humility, and respect for forces greater than ourselves. She reminds them that voyaging is not about conquest or escape, but about understanding where you stand in the world and how your choices ripple outward. The crowd listens, not because she is chiefess, but because her words reflect their own experiences. They have seen what happens when fear dictates decisions, and they have felt the strength that comes from trust. Moana finishes by encouraging each island to carry these lessons home, adapting them to their own lands and waters. Unity, she explains, does not require sameness, it requires care. One by one, the canoes push away from shore, sails catching the wind as destinations pull them in different directions. Maui appears beside Moana, watching silently. There is no dramatic farewell between them, only a shared glance that carries gratitude, growth, and mutual respect. Maui knows his place now is not to lead, but to support when needed. He tells Moana that he will continue traveling, helping where imbalance appears, but never forcing his presence. Moana thanks him, understanding that true strength lies in knowing when to step forward and when to step aside. After the last canoe disappears beyond the reef, Motunui settles into a rhythm that feels renewed rather than empty. Daily life resumes, but with subtle changes. Young navigators practice under open skies. Farmers adjust planting cycles based on shared knowledge, and fishers venture farther with confidence, rather than fear. Moana participates in these moments, not as an overseer, but as a guide, always encouraging questions and shared responsibility. Yet even in this stability, Moana knows her journey is not finished. Growth never truly ends. One evening, she visits the highest point of the island, where the stars feel close enough to touch. She remembers the fear she once felt, the doubt that whispered she was not enough. Standing there now, she realizes that courage did not arrive fully formed. It was built piece by piece, choice by choice, through mistakes and learning. Destiny did not pull her forward alone. She walked toward it. As the ocean reflects moonlight below, Moana senses presence, not as a voice or vision, but as reassurance. Te Fiti rests once more, not as a distant goddess, but as living land and sea, woven into everyday life. Balance has returned, not because someone fixed it, but because people chose to live in harmony with it. Moana understands that the greatest gift she carries is not leadership, but awareness. In the days that follow, Moana begins teaching children the same way her grandmother once taught her, through stories rather than instructions. She speaks of mistakes without shame, and of courage without exaggeration. She wants them to know that fear is natural, but it should never be the final decision-maker. The ocean listens, as it always has, responding gently, reminding them that curiosity and respect can exist together. Years later, travelers will speak of Motunui, not as the island that hid from the sea, but as the place that remembered who it was. They will talk about a leader who did not rule through power, but through connection. Moana does not seek legacy, yet one forms naturally through the lives she touches. Her story becomes part of the stars, the waves, and the songs carried across the water. On one quiet afternoon, Moana takes a canoe alone, not to escape, but to reflect. She sails beyond the reef, letting the wind guide her rather than commanding it. The ocean responds, steady and calm. As she looks back at the island, she feels no pull of conflict between staying and leaving. Both belong to her. She smiles, knowing that her place is not fixed to one shore or one role. It is found in the choices she makes with honesty and courage. The canoe turns smoothly, heading home. Moana understands now that leadership is not about reaching an ending, but about sustaining a journey. The ocean will always change, and so will she. But as long as listening remains at the heart of every step forward, balance will never truly be lost again. With that certainty, Moana sails onward, confident not because the future is predictable, but because she is ready to meet it, guided by the stars, supported by her people, and grounded in the truth of who she is.